I'm Clara Whitmore. I'm 32 years old, and in that moment, with my son shaking in my arms, I realized something I'd spent my whole life refusing to believe. My father didn't lose control. He had it, the whole time. Why? My voice came out small at first, like my throat didn't know how to carry rage yet. Why would you do that? My father glanced down at Tyler, then up at me, and sighed. Actually sighed, as if I had asked the dumbest question on earth. He needs to learn, he said calmly. Uncle Dave snapped. Learn what? How to drown? My father's eyes flicked to Dave, cold and sharp. Don't start with me. I held Tyler tighter, trying to shield him from the wind that came off the lake like a blade. I could feel his heartbeat fluttering against my chest. Fast, terrified, uneven. He's 7, I said. He's 7, Dad. My father shrugged, as if age was irrelevant. 7 is old enough to understand consequences. Consequences for what? I demanded. And that's when my mother's voice broke through the chaos, thin and shaking. Clara, please, let's just get him warm. My mother stood back near the trail, hugging her own arms, eyes glassy. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the trees. She always looked like that when my father was angry, or bored, or in control, like her body had learned to make itself smaller to survive. I turned my head, searching the dock for answers, for a reason, for literally anything that would make this make sense. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My father had his phone in his hand, not up like he was calling for help, not shaking like a normal person who had just watched a child go under, just in his palm, ready, like he'd been waiting for a moment to capture, a moment to use. Did you record this? I asked, my voice suddenly quiet. My father's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened, just slightly, a tell, the only one he ever gave. Put your energy where it belongs, Clara, he said, on your son. Uncle Dave stood up, breathing hard. His hands were wet, red from the cold, and clenched like he wanted to swing at my father, but knew the consequences would ripple through the whole family. This is sick, Dave said. This is beyond... Dave, my father cut in sharp. Don't embarrass yourself. That word embarrass hit me like a slap. My son had almost died, and my father was worried about embarrassment. I stood with Tyler in my arms, legs shaking, and stepped away from the edge of the dock. Tyler's head fell against my shoulder. He felt too light, too fragile. I looked over at the people who were supposed to be my family. My aunt had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide, but she didn't move. My cousins stood frozen, whispering to each other. One of them, Ashley, actually glanced down at her own phone like she was debating whether to film too. No one ran to help. No one yelled at my father the way they should have. They were watching me, not him, watching to see what I would do. And that's when the real fear slid into my bones. Because it wasn't just the lake. It was the silence. The silence that said, they're with him. My father stepped closer, voice lowering into that calm, deadly tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while crushing you. You're emotional, he said, like it was a diagnosis. And when you're emotional, you get dramatic. I won't have drama in front of the family. I stared at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lunge at him. I wanted to do something that proved I was a mother before I was a daughter. But then Tyler's fingers curled weakly into my shirt, and I felt how hard he was trying not to cry. So I swallowed the scream. Because I had lived long enough under my father's shadow to recognize a trap. If I exploded, they'd remember my explosion more than the fact that a child went into the water. They'd rewrite the story around my reaction. I forced my voice to stay steady. We're leaving. My father's eyes narrowed. You're not going to make a scene. I took a step back. A scene? Dad, you threw my son into a freezing lake. I pushed him, he corrected, like the word mattered. He needs to be tough. The world won't coddle him. Uncle Dave let out a bitter laugh. You're not the world, Mark. You're his grandfather. My father's gaze slid to Dave again, warning. Then he looked back at me and said something that made the air feel thin. You always do this, he said. You always take something small and turn it into a war, and then you wonder why people don't invite you. Something in my chest cracked open. Because it wasn't just about today. It was about every family event I'd been quietly excluded from. Every conversation where my opinions were too much. Every time my mother said, just let it go, like letting it go hadn't cost me pieces of myself. And now he was doing it to Tyler. I adjusted Tyler in my arms and started toward the trail. My boots slipped slightly on the wet boards, and Uncle Dave immediately moved to steady me. Clara, he murmured, low so only I could hear. Get him warm. I'll handle your dad. I shook my head. No, you can't. He'll punish you. Dave's eyes flashed. Let him try. Behind us, my father's voice followed, calm as a judge reading a sentence. If you walk away like this, he said, you'll regret it. I paused. Not because I was afraid of his threat, because I knew my father never made threats without already setting something in motion. I turned my head just enough to look at him over my shoulder, and that's when I saw it. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me, toward the dock, toward the woman standing near the far railing, the one who'd been screaming earlier. She wasn't family. I didn't recognize her, and she was holding a phone up at chest level, angled perfectly, like she'd been filming the whole thing. My blood went cold in a way the lake never could, because suddenly I understood. This wasn't just cruelty, this was strategy. And whatever my father was about to do next, he'd planned it long before Tyler hit the water. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and burned coffee. Tyler sat wrapped in a silver emergency blanket, his small body still trembling, even though they'd turned the heater up so high, sweat clung to my neck. I kept one hand on his knee the entire time, not because he needed it, because I did. The nurse kept saying words like mild hypothermia and observation, and every time she said Tyler was lucky, my chest tightened. Lucky felt like the wrong word. Lucky implied chance. What happened at the lake hadn't been chance. My father arrived 20 minutes later. Not running, not frantic, just composed. Hair neat, jacket zipped, the same expression he wore at board meetings and funerals. Solemn, controlled, unbothered by mess. He nodded to the nurse like a concerned citizen. "How's the boy?" he asked. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "Don't call him the boy." The nurse glanced between us, uncertainty flickering across her face. "He's stable," she said carefully, "but we'll need to keep him for a few hours." My father exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Good, thank you." Then he turned to me. "Now," he said quietly, "we need to talk about how this is going to be handled." Handled. Like it was a scheduling issue. I felt my hands curl into fists. Handled how? He lowered his voice, the way he always did when he wanted to sound reasonable while steering the outcome. "There was an accident," he said. "Children fall. It happens. We don't need to turn this into something it isn't." Uncle Dave, who had followed us to the clinic, snapped, "You pushed him." My father's eyes flicked to Dave, sharp, warning. "Careful." Dave didn't back down. "No, you be careful, because if you say one more—" "Dave," my father interrupted calmly, "you're emotional right now." There it was. The same word again. Emotional. He turned back to me. "Clara, if you tell people I threw your son into the lake, that story grows legs. Social services asks questions. Schools ask questions. And suddenly, things spiral." My stomach dropped. Because I knew exactly where he was going. "You wouldn't," I said. He tilted his head just slightly. "Wouldn't what?" "Use Tyler against me." My father didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the glass window of the exam room, where Tyler sat swinging his feet slowly, staring at the floor. Then he looked back at me. "I'm saying," he said evenly, "that unstable narratives invite scrutiny." Unstable narratives. That was his phrase for your version of the truth doesn't benefit me. The door opened, and my boyfriend Ethan rushed in, breathless, eyes wild. "Clara," he said, crossing the room in 3 strides. I came as fast as I... He stopped short when he saw my father. Something dark flashed across Ethan's face. What the hell happened? Before I could answer, my father stepped forward, hand outstretched. "You must be Ethan," he said. "I'm Mark, Clara's father." Ethan didn't take his hand. "He pushed a child into a lake," Ethan said flatly. "That's what happened." The air went still. The nurse stiffened. Uncle Dave inhaled sharply. My father's jaw tightened. Again, just barely. "Watch your tone," my father said. Ethan didn't blink. "Watch your actions." For a split second, I thought my father might actually lose his composure. Instead, he smiled. A small, controlled smile that made my skin crawl. "This," he said, gesturing lightly between us, "is exactly what I mean." He turned to the nurse. "My daughter has been under a lot of stress lately. Work, parenting, relationship changes. It's been challenging." I felt the blood rush to my ears. "Don't," I warned. The nurse's expression shifted, professional but alert. Ethan stepped closer to me. "You don't get to frame her like that." My father's gaze slid to Ethan, assessing, measuring. "I'm concerned," he said, "about the environment Tyler is growing up in." I laughed. I couldn't stop it. A short, broken sound. "You mean the environment where his grandfather nearly killed him?" My father's smile vanished. "That's enough," he said. "We're family. We don't do this in public." Public. Everything was about public. Just then, heels clicked against the tile floor. A familiar voice said, "Mark, is everything okay?" I turned, and my stomach dropped straight through the floor. Marissa, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. She stood near the doorway, perfectly put together, eyes wide with concern, phone already in her hand, like an extension of her body. "Marissa," Ethan said sharply, "what are you doing here?" She glanced at him, then at me, then back to my father. "I got a call," she said softly, "about an incident at the lake." My father nodded once. I thought it might help to have someone objective. Objective! Marissa had always been good at that, looking neutral while steering the story exactly where she wanted it. She stepped closer, gaze landing on Tyler through the glass. "Oh my God," she murmured. "That poor child." Her eyes flicked to me. "Clara," she said gently, "are you okay?" I felt like the ground had shifted under my feet. Ethan's voice dropped, dangerous. "You had no right to be here." Marissa looked hurt, convincing. "I just wanted to help. There are misunderstandings happening." I suddenly remembered the woman on the dock, the phone, the angle. My father's voice cut through my thoughts. "Marissa works with media compliance," he said casually. "She understands how situations like this can be misinterpreted." It clicked. This wasn't damage control. This was narrative control. I felt my mother's hand touch my arm. She leaned in close, her breath shaking. "Clara," she whispered, eyes glossy, "please. If you fight him, he'll take Tyler from you." My heart slammed against my ribs. I looked at my father, at Marissa, at the nurse watching us too closely, at Ethan, jaw clenched, ready to explode. And suddenly I understood the real danger. They weren't trying to prove he was innocent. They were trying to prove I was unfit. And the worst part? Judging by the way everyone had already started listening to my father, they were halfway there. Tyler fell asleep on my chest that night, still wrapped in the clinic blanket, his breath finally even. I didn't move. I didn't dare shift my weight, afraid the smallest change would wake him. Or worse, remind him of cold water closing over his head. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was replaying the same moment on a loop. "I should have been there," he said quietly. "If I'd come earlier." "This wasn't about timing," I said. My voice felt hollow. "This was planned." Uncle Dave stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw locked. He hadn't spoken since we got back to the house. Not a word. And that scared me more than his anger ever could. Finally, he turned. "Clara," he said, "there's something you need to see." I followed him into the study, my father's old domain when he visited, all dark wood and order. Dave moved straight to the desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside wasn't paperwork. It was a mess. Old phones, printed emails, flash drives, a manila folder thick with notes. Dave pulled it out and set it on the desk between us. "He's been preparing for this," Dave said. "Not just today, for a while." My hand shook as I opened the folder. The first page was dated 6 months ago. Incident documentation template. My stomach flipped. There were sections labeled child's behavior, parental response, witness statements, video evidence. Blank lines, waiting. Waiting for something to happen, or to be made to happen. "This isn't the first time," Dave said quietly. "It's the first time it got this close." I looked up at him. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then reached into the drawer again and pulled out an old phone. "There was another kid," he said. "Years ago. Not family. A neighbor's boy. Your dad tested him too. Pushed him into a pool during a barbecue. Laughed it off." My throat closed. "What happened?" "The parents didn't fight," Dave said. "They were intimidated. Your dad offered to help smooth things over. They took the help." "Help!" Silence bought with fear. Ethan swore under his breath. "Marissa knows this." Dave nodded. "She's not here by accident. Your dad didn't just call her. He recruited her." That's when Ethan finally looked up. "There's something I never told you," he said, eyes on me now, because I thought it was over. My chest tightened. "Tell me." "Marissa tried to frame me once," he said, publicly. Claimed I was reckless, dangerous, that I shouldn't be around kids. My blood ran cold. "She wanted leverage," Ethan continued, "when I walked away from her. Your dad helped her spin it. I didn't know how deep it went until today." I closed my eyes. The dock, the phone, the woman screaming on cue. They hadn't just pushed Tyler into the water. They'd pushed me into a corner. And then my mother spoke from the doorway. "I didn't want you to know like this," she said. I turned. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, older, tired. "He's done this before," she whispered. "Not just with children, with people. He provokes them, records them, breaks them, then calls it proof." "Why didn't you stop him?" I asked, my voice breaking. She flinched. "Because every time I tried, he reminded me what he could take." I thought of Tyler, asleep, vulnerable. Something inside me hardened. "They think I'll panic," I said slowly, "that I'll react the way they want." Dave nodded. "That's the trap." I straightened. Then we don't react. Ethan stood. We gather everything. And we don't warn them, I added. Not a word. For the first time since the lake, I felt it. Not fear. Focus. Because my father had made one fatal mistake. He assumed I'd keep begging. He assumed I'd still be his daughter first. He was wrong. The room was too bright. White walls. A long table. 3 people sitting across from us with notepads and neutral expressions, trained to listen without reacting. Social services called it a preliminary safety assessment. My father called it a formality. Marissa sat 2 chairs down from him, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore soft colors, concerned eyes, the kind of outfit that said, "Trust me," before she ever opened her mouth. Tyler wasn't there. That was the first victory I'd claimed. He was at home with Uncle Dave, wrapped in blankets, watching cartoons, far away from this room where adults decided what kind of mother I was allowed to be. My father leaned forward, voice calm, sorrowful. "I love my grandson," he said. "I would never intentionally put him in harm's way. What happened at the lake was a tragic misunderstanding." I stared at the table, because if I looked at him, I might break the one rule that mattered today. Don't give him the reaction. Marissa spoke next. "I was at the lake that morning," she said gently. "I heard shouting. I saw Clara run toward the dock, screaming." She paused just long enough. She appeared out of control. I felt Ethan's knee tense beside mine. Marissa continued, "I understand fear, but fear can make people exaggerate, and I'm worried that exaggeration is shaping this narrative." One of the caseworkers looked up. "You recorded part of the incident?" Marissa nodded. "For safety, when things escalated." The screen lit up. Video played. It showed me running, shouting. My voice cracked with terror. Tyler was already out of the water in this clip. The audio cut in and out. My father's voice was missing. The shove was missing. Only my reaction remained. "This," Marissa said softly, "is what concerned me." I clenched my hands under the table. My father sighed heavily. "Clara has always been intense, emotional. It's part of who she is. I worry that intensity may be overwhelming for Tyler." There it was, the final turn of the knife. One of the caseworkers turned to me. "Clara, would you like to respond?" I took a breath. Slow, steady. "No," I said. Marissa blinked. My father frowned. I looked at the caseworker. "I'd like to present evidence." Uncle Dave stepped forward from the back of the room. He plugged in a flash drive. The screen changed. A different video appeared. Same doc, different angle, clearer audio. You could see my father's hand on Tyler's shoulder. You could hear him say, "Jump, or I'll make you." The room went silent. The video continued. The shove, the splash, the scream from the woman planted at the far railing. Marissa's face drained of color. "That's impossible," my father said sharply. "That's edited." Dave didn't look at him. "Metadata says otherwise." The caseworker's pen stopped moving. I finally looked at my father. "For years," I said quietly, "you taught me that keeping the peace mattered more than telling the truth. Today, I choose my son." My father stood abruptly. "This is a witch hunt." One of the caseworkers raised a hand. "Sit down, Mr. Whitmore." For the first time in my life, he did. The hearing didn't end with shouting. That surprised me. It ended with silence, the heavy, procedural kind where everyone is suddenly aware that something irreversible has shifted. The caseworkers didn't look at my father the same way anymore. Their questions changed tone. Less sympathy, more precision. "How long have you had that footage? Who instructed the witness to record? Why was only one clip submitted initially?" Marissa tried to recover. She always did. "That video doesn't show intent," she said carefully. "It shows a moment taken out of context." Uncle Dave didn't argue. He just played the voicemail. My father's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. "If she melts down, we'll have what we need. Just make sure someone's recording." Marissa's shoulders sagged. Ethan finally spoke. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "She tried this with me," he said, looking straight at the panel. "When I left her. Claimed I was unstable, dangerous. Mr. Whitmore supported her." Marissa turned on him. "That's not—" "I have the text," Ethan said, "and I'm done protecting you." The caseworkers exchanged glances. My father's mask cracked. Not fully, but enough. His lips pressed thin. His hands curled slowly into fists. "This is unnecessary," he snapped. "I was protecting my grandson." I stood, not rushing, not shaking. "I spent my life trying to prove I wasn't too much for you," I said. Too loud, too emotional, too inconvenient. I looked at him fully now. "But today you almost killed my child." The room held its breath. "I'm not asking for understanding anymore," I continued. "I'm setting boundaries." One of the caseworkers nodded slowly. "Effective immediately, Mr. Whitmore will have no unsupervised contact with Tyler." My father surged to his feet. "You can't do this." "I can," she said evenly. And we are. My mother let out a small sound, half sob, half relief. Marissa stood abruptly. I need to make a call. No, the caseworker said. You need to sit. For the first time, Marissa looked scared. Outside in the hallway, my mother broke down. He's done, she whispered. I know him. This is the end. I looked through the glass window back into the room where my father sat alone, finally outnumbered. No, I said, this is the beginning, because the truth was finally loud enough to be heard. Stop! Part 6. The Public Fall. 2 weeks later, my father stood at the podium of the Lake Chelan Community Center, smiling for the cameras like nothing had ever happened. The banner behind him read, Family Values Day. I almost laughed. He believed, truly believed, that if he stood in the right place, said the right words, shook the right hands, reality would rearrange itself to match his version. That used to work. Not today. I stood in the back of the room with Ethan, Uncle Dave, and my mother. Tyler stayed home. This wasn't his burden to carry. The mayor finished his introduction. Applause filled the room. My father leaned toward the microphone. Family, he began, is about strength, discipline, and preparing the next generation for... Excuse me. The word cut through the room like glass. Every head turned. I stepped forward. My heart was steady. That surprised me most of all. This man, I said clearly, pushed my 7-year-old son into a freezing lake and tried to destroy me for reacting. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My father's smile froze. Security shifted, but Uncle Dave was already at the projector. The screen lit up. The unedited video played. The shove, the scream, the voice saying, "Jump, or I'll make you." Someone in the audience cried out. My father backed away from the podium. This is a lie. Ethan stepped beside me. The metadata says otherwise. Marissa wasn't there. She'd resigned the day before. My mother moved forward then, trembling but determined. He's done this before, she said into the microphone, and I helped him hide it. That was the moment. The moment my father understood he was alone. By the time security escorted him out, no one applauded. Later that night, Tyler crawled into my bed and whispered, Grandpa won't make me jump anymore, right? I held him tight. No, I said, never again.